Welcome to the God's Good Table podcast, where you can learn all about nutrition, healthy eating and lifestyles, non-toxic healing modalities, and what the Bible has to say about all of this. So if you're interested in any of these topics, stay tuned. But I also want to tell you about an exciting event we have coming up August 12th through 14th. God's Good Table will be at Polyface Farm near Stanton, Virginia for an exciting, encouraging, information and action-packed few days, including a bonus Sunday morning worship and fellowship time featuring Preacher Joel. You'll hear from speakers including Sally Fallon Morell, Chef Jamie Berry, Mike the Fit Farmer Dixon, Pork Rind the Pork Evangelist, Joel Salatin, of course, and myself, Maureen Diaz. Our topics include the nutritional importance of animal foods, what the Bible has to say about this, how to select and prepare these foods, and tips to get your family to eat nose to tail. The Polyface crew will be feeding us breakfast and lunch both Friday and Saturday, while we also have a special VIP dinner planned for Saturday evening. The God's Good Table crew will provide a nourishing breakfast on Sunday morning before our worship service as well. Early bird pricing ends July 13th, so go to godsgoodtable.com now to register. See you there. Hey everybody, Maureen again with God's Good Table, and I'm so excited today to have a conversation with one of my favorite chefs, Chef James Berry. I'm so happy to have you with us, Jamie. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Maureen. That's an honor coming from you, since I highly regard you as a chef and just a person as well. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've enjoyed listening to other podcasts where you've been interviewed, including, of course, Holistic Hilda. So now it's my turn, and I'm very excited about that. So I want to get going with giving you the opportunity to tell our listeners what it is that you do, what is your background, and then we can roll with your exciting business venture.
Yeah, I basically am a chef by trade. So I've been a chef for over 16 years. It was kind of a miracle that I actually finally embraced it, because it was one of those things that I loved as a kid, but I never saw it as a career. You know, how many people out there are, not living their heart's mission, and are just kind of doing the thing that they think they're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
That was me. And I finally, it took 9/11 to the events of 9/11 to kind of finally kick me out of that place of just doing things that didn't have heart. So I after 9/11, I started auditing my life, and I was like, okay, I only want to do things that have heart, that I'm passionate about, that feel, on par with my mission. And the way I kind of came to that was I looked back at my childhood and I said, well, what did I love as a kid? Because I think you're really pure when you're a kid, in terms of what you love and what you embrace. And it's not as heady and convoluted. And I was like, I always loved cooking, always loved it. I'm like, so maybe there's a program out there that fits my sensibilities now. Because one of the reasons I didn't want to embrace it back in the day was because when I thought of being a chef, I thought, well, you have to own a restaurant, you have to work late nights. And I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And then skip forward to now I'm in my 30s. It's 19, when was it? I guess it was early 2000s. And now, being a chef means you could do so many other things. You could be a private chef. You can write about recipes and cooking. You can be a consultant around food. It was just endless what you could do. And I wanted to private chef. So I went to a school that specialized in fusing health and food. And it was known for being a place where households would call looking for private chefs. So it was just a beautiful, connection that I made, because not only did I learn a lot at the culinary school, but all my jobs that I got 2 years out of school were all from the school referring me. So it was just a beautiful symbiotic relationship.
That sounds really neat. And then I know that you were able to chef to some pretty well-known people, which must have been very exciting.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an ego boost when you're cooking for, some of the top people in Hollywood, and I will name drop one because cooking for him was really significant. I was cooking for Tom Cruise, and I cooked for him for about almost 2 years, and I left. They wanted to keep me on, but I left, which actually says a lot because not a lot of people lasted under the pressures of his life. And I was, and even though it was very challenging, but I was very fulfilling as well. But I just felt the desire to help more people than just him. And the reason he was so significant for my process as a chef is because it was working for him that I finally acknowledged myself, like I acknowledged the confidence as a chef. I had this one moment where I finally met him. It was in Germany. He was shooting Valkyrie, and he brought me into the room, and it was the very first time we were meeting in person. And there were all these, production people, like the director, writers, producers, people that I knew their names, significant people from Hollywood and people who I respected. And he brought me into the room to introduce me as the person who'd been cooking their food all day. And they all stood up and started clapping for me.
Oh, wow.
And it was a real moment of like, I felt like I was going to cry, but it was a real moment of, wow, I've arrived. Like, these are people I respect and have grown up, watching and listening to and experiencing, and they're honoring me for what my skills are. So it was just it was a real kind of key moment for my confidence, and my experience. I still value my time with him so much because it gave me the strength and confidence to continue onward and feel like I could do anything.
That is a really neat story. I love that. I'm curious about what kinds of foods Tom and the others appreciated. Anything in particular?
Well, I had to sign a lot of NDAs, so I can't divulge details, but I will say that, I was really blessed with that. I was really clear about how I cooked. I didn't want to just follow trends. Like, for me, cooking is about keeping food real. I'm very much a fan of ancestral cooking. I know we're both fans of the Weston A. Price Foundation and that style of cooking. Traditional foods, culturing foods. I'm just a really big fan of how you prepare food is then how you're going to support absorbing it and what you're going to get from it.
Yeah.
And so when I first got out of culinary school, I was offered a job that was at a rehab center. And it was a place that I interned at, and they were offering me to continue working there, and they were going to pay me $9 an hour. And I was in my 30s, and I basically started crying because I was like, I can't believe I'm in my 30s. I'm leaving work where I'm getting paid, at the time, I was getting paid $25 an hour for the work I had been doing, and 25 to 30. And now I was getting offered a job for $9 an hour, and I wouldn't even be able to survive off of that. And
Right.
I felt really kind of desperate, and I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? I just completely shifted careers, and I'm at the bottom of the ladder. And yet I'm not a young person, like I said, I was in my 30s. And I, fortunately though, decided to kind of stand up for myself and just say, that I can't take a job like that. And so I said no. And then I still didn't know what I was going to do. But fortunately, I got a call the very next day from a newscaster in LA at the time, a fairly well-known newscaster in LA. Her assistant calling, looking for a private chef. And so when she called, she said, well, we're looking for someone to do this. And they were saying, like, we want specific calories, no fat, and all this kind of very trendy way of looking at food. And I was like, I can't do that for you. I don't believe in counting calories. I don't believe in like no fat. I believe that I can make you healthier if you let me cook the way I cook. And she said, well, how do you cook? And I started to tell her, and she said, okay, well, we want what you're doing. And I cooked for her for 2 years, and I helped her a lot. And that's kind of what progressed is I started to see that how I cooked for people started working for them. You know, people like women who had just had their baby, had had their child and couldn't lose that baby weight for years.
Yeah.
And then we would connect, and I would be cooking for them. And in months, they would start to lose that weight. And they were like, what are you doing? And what is this magic? What is this voodoo you're doing? And I was like, I'm just cooking real food.
Yeah.
And I'm not using things that are causing inflammation. I'm not doing things. I'm not putting sugars unnecessarily in your foods. I'm not using synthetic ingredients. You know, I'm just using real food, and I'm preparing it in a way where you can actually absorb it.
Yeah. And that way is the way that people around the world have always cooked, where some of our greatest cuisines have come, say, from Italy and France, for instance, France being my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is fresh and from scratch totally. And there's definitely no calorie counting. But they're using rich fats like duck fat and butter and cream. And I love Julia Child's. And if you don't have cream, add more butter or whatever.
Right.
Or
Well,
if
there's
you don't have butter.
a famous chef once said that 85% of a great meal is just the sourcing of it.
Yeah,
You know,
I
so just
understand.
picking that fresh food is you know, and ensuring that it's been, you know, allowed to ripen on the vine, opposed to, you know, pulled off early and then ripened through chemicals or on a truck or something.
Yeah.
That when you buy really nice food, you don't have to do much to it. And I agree with you, like much of European fare is just very simply done. You know, it's just
Yeah.
really good fat, really quality food, and then good protein. You know what I mean? It's the kind of,
Yeah.
that's it.
And then people end up feeling much better, looking much better, functioning much better. The brains are working better. Um, and we're all so busy and on the go, but if we don't have good food to hold us, to anchor us, we can't function well, can we?
No, and you know, Sally Fallon mentions this a lot, which is, you know, you can eat the best food in the world, but if your body's not absorbing it, then what's the point? You know, and it's so
Yeah.
true. You know, we live in an age where I don't think people think like that. They think, you know, I remember when healthy was a grilled chicken breast, steamed vegetables, and a baked potato. That was, I mean, and that wasn't that long ago. That
Yeah.
was, you know, late 90s, you know, early 2000s, when people were still thinking like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we, you know, fortunately have a whole new outlook on what's healthy. But, you know, one of the reasons why I started, you know, I know the business we're going to talk about, which is Pluck seasoning, is because, you know, 92% of Americans are nutrient deficient. So, and that's a
That's massive.
it's a massive, it's a conservative number. I mean, we have to imagine it's actually even higher than that.
Yeah.
And yet we're clearly not starved for food. We're not calorie deficient. We're nutrient
Right.
deficient. That's a very important distinction, because America as a whole is an obese or overweight nation. We have an
Yeah.
epidemic of obesity and
Yeah.
overweightness. So it's not the food people are eating, that's it's not having enough food.
Right.
Whereas that might be the case, you know, in other countries. But in this country, it has nothing to do with not having enough food. It has to do with the food we're choosing to eat.
Exactly. Exactly. And we all know a lot of people, and I was in this category formerly, that they have no shortage of food, as you're saying, but they're obese and experiencing a lot of health issues, and serious health issues in some cases. In my case, I was eating healthy food, from scratch food that I was raising myself, but I was eating the wrong kinds of food as well. And that too much bread and ice cream,
Mm-hmm.
and not enough meat and fat and vegetables. So even within the realm of eating whole food and real food, we still need to focus on getting the nutrients that our body needs and not just the calories, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it took me, so right out of college, I got a kidney stone. One of the most painful things I've ever had happen to me. It's the closest a man could get to having giving childbirth, and it's still not that close. To give you an idea, it's really
I've heard
painful.
that.
But what I learned from it, and I'm so grateful for it, is that I learned, and I was around 21 when this happened, but I learned that, oh, what I eat and drink affects my health. And that may sound so simple, but ultimately that is the biggest lesson any of us can learn, is that the food we put in our body, the drinks we choose to put in our body, those will affect our health. It's the thing we do the most every day. And so whenever you have any kind of ailment, any kind of situation where you don't feel good, my vote is always, the first thing I do is look at what I'm eating.
Exactly. Yeah, I do as well. I'm glad you learned that and you've been able to run with it. And I did as well. What Aaron and I are, of course, trying to do is to take that same message out to the masses. We've followed Weston A. Price Foundation and Weston A. Price's teaching for years. And you have, when did you first learn of Dr. Price's research?
2004, when I was in culinary school, actually, we studied it there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I got really into it. I just immediately connected with it and saw the value.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a long time. Been a long time. I mean, honestly, like I've been in the kind of health arena field for so long now that things I was doing, back in the day are now just getting popular. I'm trying to think of an example, but like
Kombucha, sauerkraut.
Yeah, like all, the cultured vegetable. I mean, I was doing all that, the bone broth. I mean, I was doing all that stuff a long time ago. So now that it's also popular, it's funny because everyone's like, oh, well, what recipes do you do? I'm like, oh gosh, I haven't done, I haven't thought about that in 10 years. Like,
Yeah.
because I was really passionate about that, 15 years ago. And so now I'm kind of like, well, I don't think about it as much.
You just do, right?
I just do it. Yeah. And honestly, just like any trend, you start out, not trend, sorry, anything you're passionate about, you start out really like going all in, 2 feet in, and you're making everything from scratch. But if, over time, you eventually get a little lazy, or you're focusing on other things. And so maybe you then buy the cultured condiments that, meet your criteria opposed to making them. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't make this stuff from scratch as much as I used to. And that's just being honest.
Well, I oftentimes find myself going to a store and trying to find fermented organic sauerkraut because I run out. And
yeah, I mean, that's the reality too, is like, we have, it's one of the reasons why I also created Pluck, which is, and I guess I should probably share that, since I've now mentioned it twice, probably share what it is. But when I think of health, I really do look at it from a practical place. Like, we can have the best intentions, but if you can't actually integrate it into your life, then what good is it? We can talk left and right about what to eat, what not to eat, but for the person that doesn't know how to cook, or the person that doesn't know where to source, or the person just is a single parent, or doesn't have time, doesn't have the passion for it, it's really an uphill battle. So my goal has always been, well, how can I make it easy but effective?
yeah,
and that's why I came up with Pluck, which is an organ-based seasoning, as you know. It's a way to get organ meats into the diet as easy and simply and deliciously as possible.
So I'm going to show you now that little treat that I told you, that I had prepared.
Yeah.
Bone marrow. I roasted some bones this afternoon so that I can scoop the marrow out and then make broth. And guess what I put on top of it?
Pluck seasoning.
Pluck seasoning. So I could get a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
I love that. And then I taste it with just a sip of red wine.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It's so good, right? So good on that. What is it? How would you describe Pluck seasoning?
It's many layers of flavor. It's very complex, and it's very agreeable with almost anything. I don't put it in my panna cotta. I don't put it in my ice cream, and I don't put it in my tea, but I put it in just about everything else. Yeah. Whether it be scrambled eggs, or obviously the beef marrow, or stew, I put it on my roasted chicken. I put it on my hamburgers or in my burgers, everything, because you formulated a flavor palette that goes with almost anything. While at the same time, we're getting the wonderful nourishment from the organ meats that are tucked away in there. Right. Without even detecting it. Although I like the flavor of many organ meats, most people, as you know, gag. So
Right.
what you've done is you've made it accessible.
And that was definitely the goal, because we do have a blend coming out soon that is just the organ meat. It's 100% organ meat. So it's definitely going to be for those people that don't mind the acquired taste, that want just the 100% nutrition. But Pluck seasoning was always the way I always wanted it to be, was the gateway. It's just a gateway to getting you into organ meats. It's not meant to be your last stop. My encouragement is for everyone to try all as much nose to tail, eat as much nose to tail as they can, because that's one thing, when we think of organ meats, well, what are organ meats? A lot of people just default to liver, kidney, heart, but it's much more than that. It's another name for it is offal, which is not the best name, but we'll take it. And that's OFFAL, so offal. And it just refers to the parts of the animal that typically fall off when you're butchering. So that could be, the more common, like I mentioned, the liver, kidney, heart. The less common, the spleen, lungs, testicles, ovaries, brain, which are definitely harder to get. The thymus or pancreas, which I always love this question because no one really usually knows what it is. But when you go to a restaurant and you see sweetbreads on the menu, that's what that is. It's pancreas and thymus or thymus. Yeah. Bone marrow, as you mentioned, tongue, lips, ears, skin. So all the blood, all that is awful. The only thing that they don't count as awful is the bone, the literal bone. Everything in it, they count as awful, but the bone is just the bone. And so that is, when I say nose to tail, my goal is to try to support people in getting as many of those things I just mentioned into their diet. And so Pluck has 5 of them. So Pluck has liver, kidney, heart, spleen, and pancreas. And my hope is to later have a product that has other things like the testicles, the ovaries, the brain, if I can get access to it. That's hard. I want to continue to make it very accessible for people to get these organs, mostly because of that deficiency. We know that people are deficient, and we know that organ meats are one of the most nutrient dense products on the planet. So to me, if the scale is like this, if we know we have organ meats are the most nutrient dense, and yet people are nutrient deficient, then to me, the way to balance that scale is for people to get more of that nutrient sufficient food like organ meats.
Yeah. I find it interesting that an animal, just like a person, has all of these organs and they're in the correct proportion for their body. When we are eating that animal and appreciating the animal, we should appreciate all of those organs as well. And we should be consuming in the same general proportions for our health instead of focusing on just the muscle meat. And I know from, I'm sure you're aware, and you can probably tell stories too, of the research of cultures around the world who didn't highly value the muscle meat. They valued the organ meat.
Absolutely. And there's a concept called like supports like. So and so the idea being that if you are needing liver support, then you should be eating animal liver. If you're needing brain support, you should be eating brain from an animal. So and I think when talking about organ meats, we also have to speak to the myths or the things that are deterring people from eating it. So, and some of those were the things that I really wanted to solve. So one of them, as you already mentioned, is that ick factor. A lot of people have this idea, even though they've never tried it, mind you, right? A lot of people just go to this place of, organ meats. They got that ick face. Right. And yet you ask them, have you ever tried it? And they're like, no. So how do you know to have that face? I don't know. It just, it's unfamiliar. So I totally understand. I mean, I was that way too. I didn't eat organ meats as a kid. So the ick factor is the first deterrent. The other is we've lost the art of cooking them. A lot of people don't know how to cook it anymore. So the culinary skills or knowledge is one of them. Another deterrent is sourcing. A lot of people don't know where to get them, how to get access to them. And then the fourth might be cost, not with organ meats, but with capsules, because the people that know they should be eating organ meats are buying them in supplement form, and it gets expensive. Now, if they actually just bought the whole organs, they'd find it's actually much cheaper than muscle meat. But then you're dealing with the other issues, which is the cooking or the sourcing or the ick factor, right? So those were all things I immediately wanted to try to solve. And I think I did, with Pluck, because I'm utilizing modern technique of freeze drying. So we currently, when you buy encapsulated organ meats, it's freeze dried powdered organ meats. So it's raw organ meats that have been freeze dried, powdered, and then they're just encapsulated. So I was like, well, I'm going to take the same source that they're using for the capsules, and it's usually coming from New Zealand, from 100% grass-fed cows, pasture raised, no hormones, no antibiotics, and very high quality. And I'm going to take that same ingredient, but I'm going to help to offset the flavor. And so I added organic spices and herbs, and I just added them in a way that would make it would make the person eating Pluck not deal with the ick factor. You don't need to know how to cook anything. You can sprinkle on literally anything, and you're going to increase the nutrient load and get nutrients that you were previously not getting from that food.
Yeah, that's right. And I've used Pluck on some of my foods when people have come over who otherwise would definitely react with that ick. I can't do that. And yet after the meal, I've said, oh, by the way, you just had a helping of, not a full helping, but you had some organ meats in that food that you just ate, and people are usually intrigued. Sometimes, and I want to go into this as well, I use Pluck in addition to and on top of the organs that I eat, because I do. Last week, for instance, I made beef liver and onions. I was just very hungry for it. I knew my body needed it. I was going to take a picture and do a write-up about it, but I was so hungry for it, I ate it immediately, right? So I took a picture of an empty bowl, but I put Pluck on the liver and onions. So I want to talk about how we can incorporate organ meats generally, even when people have that ick factor. And then, of course, how we can enhance them with the Pluck seasoning as well.
I love hearing that and you're not alone, and people tell me, oh yeah, I put it on my organ meats as well. I'm like, well, great, because I designed it to be just a good seasoning. It's meant to be, replace like your common Lowry's all-purpose or your Old Bay. So it's like, it's designed to just be very flavorful. So I feel the same way. I mean, I put it on, we were talking before, I do the same. I put it on everything. I mean, there's not one thing I don't put it on. I mean, I don't eat a lot of sweets, so that's why I agree with you. I wouldn't gravitate towards putting it on sweets, but I know clients who have, and they've said it's really good. It kind of adds that umami saltiness to the sweet. So
I'll have to try.
Anyone that likes the salty sweet things, you like kettle corn and all that kind of salty stuff, they'll probably like it. But it's just not where I gravitate towards.
I don't eat a lot of sweets either. I'm not drawn to that, but I do make sweets, mild sweets with natural sweeteners when I have company or when there's a special something going on. But I would try when you come out with the next product, organ meats just encapsulated or in powder.
Yeah, so I'm going to do it. It's going to be on powder, a pouch where you can just spoon it into things, anything that has flavor.
That's better than a capsule.
Yeah, it will be cheaper, and then that way you don't have to open the capsules and throw out the capsule. So just make it, once again, I want to make it easy. I just if it's easy, then it's more likely you'll use it, do it. But in terms of supporting organ meats, so I usually break it down this way. I look at, as I mentioned, I see Pluck as the gateway. It's just, it's the easiest way to do it. So I definitely see, like, if you're doing it in stages, that Pluck is technically the first stage.
Yeah.
It's the first one you want to try if you're not acclimated to that umami taste. You just are, you need to get over the hump of the association you have with organ meat, get
Yes.
over the psychological thing. Just using Pluck is going to help that, because it's going to help to start to shape your palate with the umami and the flavor. And it's just so easy. So you'll do it as often as you can. Hopefully I recommend you just season it like you would salt and pepper. So you have it on your table and you're doing it for everything. Because
Yeah.
the key with Pluck is it's micro dosing, right? Because it's not 100% organ blend. It's micro dosing plus
Right.
frequent use equals a cumulative effect. So you're getting micro dosing, but if you use it often, you absolutely will get the benefits.
Yeah.
And then once you've done that, I then recommend the next stage being where you either make or purchase like an ancestral blend. So Force of Nature has a great blend, and it has like, liver and heart in it. And it's just ground meat. And sometimes you can even buy it from your farmer if you talk to them.
Yeah.
It's ground meat that already has had some of the heart or the liver ground into it. And they just pick a percentage. And if you're making your own, I recommend not going over 25%. I find
Yeah.
when you go over 20 or 25%, now the texture of the ground meat changes and the flavor. And
Yeah.
that's great if you're someone like yourself who likes the flavor. But the goal for this first early stage is I want to incorporate organ meats, but I don't want to taste them.
Exactly. And that's why I have recipes. Well, when we butchered our own animals or had them butchered, I always had the liver, some of the liver, because I wanted to eat some of it, but some of the liver and kidneys and the sweetbreads ground into the ground meat.
Yeah.
And then I could make meatloaves and meatballs and burgers with that. So we always got a dose of those good organs, no matter what I was making. And then, of course, we have recipes that we use at the Wise Traditions Conference that incorporate, for instance, we have a pate campagna, which is pork liver and ground pork belly and more pork fat and
Yeah.
good seasonings, and it comes out really like a meatloaf. So it is more like 25% liver and a lot of ground pork, and the pork belly, as you know, is
Yeah. So good.
yeah. So we feed that to people and they just gobble it up. And when I do that kind of thing here at home to unsuspecting friends and neighbors, they gobble it up as well. But if you go above, I usually stay at about 20%. If you go,
Yeah, I do as well.
yeah.
20% is kind of the max I normally do, but I say 25 because sometimes that's easier to measure for people.
Mhm.
But basically, just to put it in a visual form for people, we're talking a pound. So a pound of ground meat is 16 tablespoons. So
Mhm.
25% of that would be 4 tablespoons, right? Which
Right.
is basically a fourth of a cup. So you want to be doing a little under a fourth of a cup if you're trying to do that 20%.
Yeah. Yeah. And that works.
That's usually how I recommend you visualize it. But I definitely, so that's usually phase 2. Now, phase 2, kind of 2.5, or you could say phase 3, is for people that are like, okay, I don't mind touching and working with the organ. And so in that situation, I say, okay, purchase first organ to purchase is like a beef liver.
Mhm.
You're going to get it usually frozen. It's pretty large, and you can do 2 things with it. You can either defrost it enough, not all the way, but enough to cut it into tiny little pieces that you can then swallow. And we just call those liver shots.
Right.
And you put them, I'm talking pill size, pieces, literally, where you don't have to chew it. Because if you have to chew
Right.
it, you're going to taste it. But if it's small enough that you can just swallow it, then it's seamless. There's no taste to it, but yet once again, you're getting the benefit of it. And it's raw, and so it's really good for you. So that's one way to do the liver shots. And then the other way is to leave that liver frozen and only pull it out when you need to use it, and just grate it. Just grate it
Oh,
in.
yes.
I love doing that, showing people that, because one of the one of the biggest issues with organ meats is that they're just big, right? So like you get a beef liver, it's huge.
It's amazing how big it is. Yeah.
It's so big. And so a lot of people are like, like what if I defrost it and start cooking some of it, I can't use all of it. And I'm like, great, then don't defrost it. Just keep it frozen and grate it as much as you want. Grate that 20% into your ground meat, whatever it is. And then put the rest right back in the freezer and it's still preserved.
And a lot of people tell me that they do that and then they put that in a smoothie.
Oh, absolutely. You won't know it. You could grate a couple tablespoons into your chocolate smoothie or whatever it is. You will not know it's there.
Yeah, you won't. And from there, what's the next phase?
Well, so then now my thought is, okay, you've grated it, you're touching it. So now you're getting more and more acclimated to it. You've now hopefully found a source for it. So now let's dive into actually making the organ meat not the star of the meal, but a visual part of the meal. So, and I usually recommend you do heart, and the simplest animal heart is chicken. That one, it's just the flavor is actually sweet. The heart is the closest to muscle meat of any of the organs.
Yes.
Tongue would be also up there. Tongue and heart are the closest to muscle meat. And they're just, particularly the chicken hearts, they don't have that. They don't have a taste really that is people associate with, or it's not irony or anything like that.
No, it really does taste like chicken.
Yeah, it's just so mild. And so what I recommend you do is, so in this case, if let's just say you're using the chicken hearts, you chop them up like you would a mushroom. So they're just little diced pieces, and then throw them into the stir fry. So they're not the main, you might, let's just say, still be using chicken. Let's say you have chicken thigh in the saute. The heart is just meant to be a complementary to that. So just treat it as though it was a mushroom. If you were adding mushrooms to that dish, you wouldn't make mushrooms the main show. You would just do, part of it mushroom.
Right.
And do the same thing with the heart. And so now you're actually getting bits of heart, but it's still not visual. You're not looking at your dish going, oh, there's heart in there. It looks like, really, it's going to look like mushroom. That's honestly what it's going to probably look like. And then taste wise, you're not even going to notice it.
Right.
So that would be, the phase 4-ish. And then from there, then I would say, okay, now that you're used to cutting it, you're working with it, you're sourcing it. Now let's make it the main show.
Right.
And so I would then do tongue. Tongue would be the first thing I would do when it's the primary. This is now going to be the primary meat, organ meat.
Yeah.
This is the dish. And how I would do it is, so we all love tacos, right? Tacos are a great family meal.
Yeah.
And tongue, when you cook it, you can braise it or cook it like you would any kind of pulled pork or something like that. You just
peel that layer of skin off of it.
Yeah, but if you cook it first for a couple hours, it just peels right off.
Yeah.
That layer of skin just comes right off. You don't even have to do it before you cook it.
What do you cook it in? I'm just curious.
So I usually cook it in, I even sometimes add some onions, maybe even a little garlic, and then I use either some broth or water at first just to cook it. And I cook it I cook it in either a slow cooker or like a pressure cooker.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a slow cooker, it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours. It doesn't even have to be that long. And then you pull it out, and it's just already that skin, that outer layer will start to kind of be peeling off, just help it out. And then what's underneath that skin is this very like stringy muscle meat. And so then what I do with that is I put that on a sheet tray. I season it a lot of times with Pluck, but you could just do salt, whatever you want. I season it, and then I stick it under the broiler, and I make it like carnitas.
Oh, cool. I have never done that.
It gets crispy. It gets crispy just like you would carnitas. That's what carnitas is pulled pork.
Yeah.
That's then broiled, that gets crispy on the outside. And so basically I do that. I shred it first, and then I put it under the broiler, get it crispy. And then that's the meat for tacos. And that's what we use for a taco night.
Yeah. And I love that.
No one will know. No one will know. And if for some reason the tongue you get is not huge, you can always combine it with some other, meat. if you want, and just combine the both of them together. Like I think pulled pork and beef tongue would be fantastic together. So you could
Yeah.
always just do that and have a carnitas night.
Really, tongue tacos are one of my favorite things. Yeah.
And then, and then from there you can keep going, forward. You can start using tripe. You can start using liver and onions is obviously an easy one. You can then start doing pâtés, I mean, you can just kind of from there, just let your adventurous, palate take you wherever you want to go. But I think that will progressively get you there.
Yeah. And then the one that you've mentioned several times that is difficult now to get is brain.
Brain, yeah.
I unsuccessfully made brain fritters, for my mother-in-law once, and decided I would leave it to other people to do a better job of it. But yeah, we gently boiled that and pulled the outer membrane off. Actually, one of my girls did a much better job of it than I did.
I've never actually had it. I've never sourced it, just because you can't find it commercially. So you have to go to a farm, a local farm. You got to talk to them, and then, they're only going to have so many brains, right? Because every animal has one brain. So you just got to hope that you ask before someone else does, and hope that they'll sell it to you. Because a lot of times, when we talk about, I think an important conversation when we talk about organ meats is supply chain. Even a fantastic farm like Polyface does not have access to all the organs of the animals that they get slaughtered, because any farm or ranch is in a relationship with a meat processing plant, and that meat processing plant has what's called a HACCP plan. And the HACCP plan is basically their legal definition of how and what they will kill, what they will, butcher from that animal. And it's recording how they do it, so that if there's ever any issues with the meat, they can track it. They can prove that, well, this is how we do it.
And they want brains because of mad cow disease.
Right. Because when mad cow disease happened, even though mad cow disease has to do with the industry feeding sick animals to, supposedly healthy animals, and then those healthy animals becoming sick, even though it had nothing to do with brain, it had to do with the sick animals. They still associate it with the brain. And so that's why it's really hard to get in the US. But those slaughtering houses, that HACCP plan that every slaughtering house has is dictating what they are willing to sell or not sell. And so I talked to the team at Polyface, and I think, and maybe it's changed since I talked to them, but they previously could get the liver, they could sometimes get the kidney, and then they could get the heart. So the liver and the heart were the main ones they could get, but their butcher plant wouldn't give them access to the other stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to find. But when you find it, don't tell anyone, because because then
that's exactly what I'm thinking, because we had we butchered all of our small animals, but our larger animals we used to send to an abattoir. And after the mad cow disease thing, they started to not want to give us everything. Well, we had farmers that I dealt with through my Weston A. Price chapter, who a couple of them just built butcher shops.
Yeah,
so
that's the way to do it.
Sent our animals to them, and we could get everything.
Yeah, you're just, and the key with that is that you like I said, you can't sell it commercially. When you set up stuff, usually the meat that those kind of butchers create is not for sale. And so what it is you get it through a meat share. And so that's really the scenario you're going to find, or it's your animal. So, right. It's either a meat share, or it's your animal, and you're getting every part of that animal, which is glorious.
But the USDA butcher shops still don't want to give you the brains.
Right.
They're hesitant with spleen and all of that. Very difficult to get legally through a regular abattoir these days, but we have our underground sources.
Well, and one of my goals with my company is to work on the domestic supply chain in the US, because there really isn't one right now. The organ meats from USDA facilities, most of them are designated as not for human consumption. So they're going to the pet food industry, or they're going to zoos to feed the animals there. And sometimes they're just completely discarded. Sometimes it's just trash. So it really depends. There is a false belief. People think that it's like, oh, well, if it's not being sold at a butcher shop, then it's completely just thrown away. And that's not true. The U.S. meat industry is very efficient. They're very much trying to get money from as much as they can. It's just most of it is not designated for human consumption. So that's why you don't see it in a butcher shop.
Right. Sometimes I wonder if in a starvation situation, we shouldn't just be eating canned dog food.
I know, seriously, some of
Feeling
those foods are probably a lot more healthier than what's in cans for human consumption. That's so true.
yeah.
But it does make me want to go back and touch on the myths that I brought up, because I think, just touching on the butchering myth is one thing, but there's two myths that I find come up around organ meats. And one is around vitamin A, that I'll get too much vitamin A, that basically I'll get it become toxic for me because I get too much. And then the other is that organs are it's where toxins get
oh yes, where toxins are stored.
Right, that they get stored there, that it's a filtration for toxins, and so that basically they all get stored in there. And so if you don't mind, I'd love to address those.
I want you to talk about that, because that's something that I address as well. So
cool.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So let's just talk about first the toxins, and really what are organs, right? So really they are filtrations, but they're so nutrient sufficient because they're designed to help take toxins that come into your body and turn them into water soluble material so that it can leave your body. Because if you think about it, when things are water soluble, that means they can leave through your pee, through your poop, through your sweat, right? They can leave through your detoxification pathways, but they have to be water soluble to leave your body, right? If we sweat, it's liquid that we sweat. You don't usually see fat globules, coming out of your pores, right? It has to be a liquid, like a water soluble liquid.
Yeah.
So that's really what the organs are doing. They're just taking the toxins and they're making them water soluble. But the issue is when you have issues with your health, sometimes the toxins can get stored in your body, but they still don't get stored in the organs. They go into your fat.
Right.
Which people get confused because they're like, well, what about fatty liver issues? Well, it's like, well, yeah, that is an issue because you're obese. And so you have had fat accumulating around your organs. And so, yes, that fat can sometimes store the toxin, but the organ itself is not storing the toxin.
It's not. That's what I tell people too. It's not a storage organ. It's a filtration organ. And of course, that brings up a good point to be made also. And that is our bodies need fat. And fat is one of the tastiest part of any cut of meat that you might eat. But if you're consuming any part of an animal from a conventional operation, a factory farm, where there's a lot of chemical residue and the genetically modified feed, then that best, most beautiful taste that you might want is actually the most toxic as well, because the organs have done their job very efficiently. They've removed the toxins and stored them in the fat. So It's really important that we eat cleanly sourced meats. And of course, you're getting your organ meats from New Zealand, where they're not allowing all of the genetically modified foods and the heavy input of chemicals, not limited to glyphosate, but that being a major one. And therefore, it's very much safe. But we have a lot of farmers here who are trying to do things right. So we need to be careful about where we source our food.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I hope to solve with my company is like I said, I'm trying to get that domestic supply chain established and collect the really quality products, these organ meats from these small farms, from these farmers that are doing it right, but then get access to them all and then use them for food products
Yeah.
instead of them going to dog food, but get them into human food products. So that's definitely on the roster, and I've been working on it now for about 8 months and hitting a lot of red tape and a lot of walls. But
Mm.
I do see it. I really do think I will achieve it, and I look forward to spreading that nose to tail way of eating in easy,
Yeah.
easy ways as I achieve it. I really I look forward to that, because we New Zealand has great quality product, but I mean, as you mentioned, we have lots of farmers in the US that do great work, and
Yes.
I would much, particularly with the current state of affairs around food and international climate, that I think the more that we can establish a domestic supply chain for these really high quality foods, these really nutritious
Yeah.
foods,
And
the
a
better
local,
off we are.
yeah.
And the more accessible we can make them, because obviously when you're getting product from New Zealand, it's going to cost more because of the shipping, right? So if I
Right.
can get it though from California or from a local farm in the US, it's going to be cheaper.
Right. And with Weston A. Price Foundation, that's one of the reasons that we have local chapters, is to connect those good, clean farmers with the consumers that need their food. So
Absolutely.
try to
And
do.
and then to just address the other myth really quickly, is the vitamin A toxicity potential. And those studies that are out around that have to do with synthetic vitamin A. And so the key thing is to distinguish between anything around worrying about toxicity around getting too many vitamins. Is this source synthetic, or is it whole food? When it's coming from whole foods like liver
Yeah.
or organ meats, your body actually can take what it needs and then relinquish whatever it doesn't need. So it just pees out the rest, or it leaves your detoxification pathways in some way. So
Right.
the fear of getting too much of a good thing when it's from a whole food isn't actually a legitimate fear.
There's also a synergistic effect when the food is not, the nutrient is not isolated from a food, but the nutrient is in its proper proportions with the associated nutrients. In this case, vitamin D, for
Right.
example. Yeah, so they work together synergistically. When you separate them, you may be playing with fire if you take too much of one or the other. That's why we suggest, for instance, cod liver oil or cod livers instead of just vitamin D supplementation.
Right. That is the more whole food you can get, the better. And I know, and that's another little tidbit too. If you're making pate, and I know Sally talks about this a lot, is that if you're making a pate like with a beef liver, then
Mhm.
you want to use pork fat to cook,
Right.
to make it with, because the pork fat's going to be high in vitamin D and the liver is going to be high in vitamin A, and together you'll help to make it even better for your body.
Right, and with that, it is better. It tastes better as well. It adds everything that is good for us, that is truly good for us, I find tastes wonderful, and that's just an incredible benefit that it always makes me happy to think about. So we're going to spread more good news about nose to tail nutrition at Polyface
Excellent.
Farm. Jamie's coming to speak. We have information up on our website, but we have a whole menu of speakers and topics all relating to nose to tail nutrition. It includes a VIP dinner with limited tickets, of course. And we're just really excited, Jamie, to have you come and talk about it.
I'm so excited. I'm preparing what I hope to be a very fun and informative presentation. So I'm
Yeah,
really excited to share.
that's great. Thank you. I'm excited to see you again and to hear what you have to say. So with that, we're going to wrap it up for today, but we'll be back with more. We've got a whole list of podcasts in the pipeline waiting to come out. But this one with Jamie, it's been especially delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to get Pluck,
Yes.
I'm sure you're going to have them in the show notes, your own
Yeah.
personal link, because I think you guys
We have a
You guys
link
have a
on
link.
our resource page, and we will put a link in the show notes as well. Yes.
Yeah, and I'll just verbally say it's at eatpluck.com, and click the link below this to get some, because I hope my mission is to really help people. I want 1 million people to eat organ meats.
Yeah.
So if that means starting with Pluck, great. If you're already eating them in other ways, then great. But let's just continue to get organ meats into our diets, because I believe that we can make the world a better place by doing it. If we feel better in our bodies, we're going to treat other people better. So
I believe that you're
please
right.
join me in that mission, everyone listening,
Yeah.
and encourage people to eat organ meat.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
All right, take care.
Today's episode of the God's Good Table podcast is brought to you by Simply Ghee. Simply Ghee is my go-to fat in my kitchen. I use it every single day for everything from frying eggs and sauteing vegetables to making cakes and cookies and things like that. It comes in the original formula and the A2 variety. Simply Ghee provides the delicious, intense butter flavor that we all love, but without any of the tummy-bothering lactose that is in just butter. It is made from the grass-fed butter of a herd of cattle in the pristine Pennsylvania Dutch country. So you know that it is safe, delicious, and full of good nutrition. Simply Ghee also now has a variety of spice mixes that you can mix into your ghee. This happens to be my favorite. It's the black garlic. I used this just yesterday on my cheeseburger and steamed vegetables. It's really, really good, and you can mix it in whatever concentration you desire, but about a teaspoon per cup is usually enough. It also comes in sriracha, heirloom salt and pepper, turmeric and black pepper, and maple cinnamon varieties. So with the ghee and the spices, you can mix it up and create flavor sensations in your kitchen for your family to enjoy. And while we're at it, we can kick it up another notch with Eat Pluck. Pluck seasoning is an organ-based seasoning from grass-fed clean New Zealand cattle. It's delicious, it's nutritious, and it removes that yuck factor when you're trying to introduce organ meats to your family with all of the benefits that they provide. So I encourage you to give Simply Ghee a try and their new spice mixes, and Pluck as well. And if you use the promo code HEALTH, you'll receive 10% off your order at the Simply Ghee website. Thanks, relax, and enjoy the podcast.